Why do women sometimes fail to comprehend their own nature, let alone expect men to decipher their complexity? Sigmund Freud, the pioneer of psychoanalytic theory, posed exactly this question, and although many find his conclusions uncomfortable, they continue to reveal fundamental truths today. The feminine mind operates on profound levels, filled with contradictions and guided by internal forces that even she cannot master. Freud once declared that the greatest mystery he could never solve was understanding what a woman truly desires. This seemingly straightforward inquiry reveals a deeper reality. Female thought processes and emotional responses don't always conform to logical frameworks. In this exploration, we delve into Freud's challenging insights regarding desire, emotion, psychological projection, and the subconscious patterns that many women themselves cannot grasp. Be warned, these revelations aren't designed to please or conform to social expectations. They exist to illuminate rather than comfort. Perhaps today you'll encounter concepts that will remain permanently etched in your memory, ideas that will suddenly become visible everywhere in their behavior, responses, choices, and in your own experiences with women. Consider this question initially. Do you believe women always understand their own emotions? Or do they frequently act from impulses that originate much deeper? Share your honest perspective in the comments, and if you're prepared today to look beyond surface appearances, write the word instinct as a signal that you want to truly comprehend rather than simply listen. According to Sigmund Freud, human behavior, particularly in emotional and interpersonal relationships, isn't primarily controlled by conscious thought, but by the unconscious mind. This represents one of the most startling aspects of his theories about women. Many of their actions, reactions, and decisions emerge from an internal space they can barely comprehend themselves. Freud observed that women often act emotionally without awareness of the true source driving their behavior. They might claim they seek stability, yet find themselves drawn to chaotic men. Or they declare they want peace while simultaneously creating drama. Not from dishonesty, but because their conscious self conflicts with their unconscious desires. Consider this example. A woman criticizes a man for being too predictable, despite previously stating she sought exactly that quality: security. The truth runs deeper. Her unconscious mind craves emotional tension, friction, even uncertainty, because these feelings are emotionally familiar to her, perhaps through childhood experiences. She remains unaware of this pattern, yet acts according to it. This doesn't suggest that women are irrational or capricious. Rather, it indicates they often don't understand why they feel what they feel. Freud labeled this mechanism repression. The mind protects itself from uncomfortable truths by pushing them into the unconscious, where they continue operating unobserved. For men, this becomes particularly dangerous when they take women's words literally. You hear what she says, but you experience what she does. Between these two realities lies a vast chasm, and failing to recognize this gap leads you into emotional traps you'll never fully understand. Carl Jung, Freud's student, stated that what we don't consciously live encounters us as fate. This principle applies directly here. What she doesn't consciously reflect upon will manifest in her relationships through recurring patterns, conflicts, or decisions that don't align with her stated intentions. A stoic approach helps you maintain clarity. You don't take everything personally. You understand that not every emotional outburst follows logic. Not every reaction signals control. You observe without immediately judging, and through this practice, you recognize it's not about you. It's often about her internal struggles. The unconscious governs more than we're willing to acknowledge, especially within the feminine psyche. Those who understand this don't merely listen to what she says. They perceive what she cannot see herself. Therein lies genuine clarity. Freud recognized early that humans rarely express honestly what they truly want, especially regarding love, sexuality, and intimacy. In women, these contradictions often appear particularly pronounced. They voice desires, expectations, or boundaries, then act in completely opposite ways. not because they intend to manipulate, but because internal conflicts operate that aren't clear to them. A classic illustration. A woman states she wants a reliable, loving man. Yet once she finds one, she loses interest or feels constrained. Instead, she attracts men who are dominant or even disrespectful. What occurs here? Her conscious self seeks security, while her unconscious self seeks emotional tension that she perceives as authentic. Freud described this phenomenon as ambivalence, the simultaneous presence of opposing feelings or needs. A woman can therefore simultaneously long for closeness and freedom, for a strong man while also desiring control, for emotional depth while seeking protection from vulnerability. This internal conflict manifests in behavior. For men, this creates confusion. You provide what she requests, but she withdraws. You give her space, and she complains about distance. These fluctuations generate frustration, bewilderment, and sometimes guilt in many men. Yet in reality, you're not the problem. You're simply a projection screen for her internal contradictions. Another example. She says she wants clarity but avoids every serious conversation. Or she emphasizes how much she values emotional maturity while behaving passively, aggressively, jealously, or childishly herself. These discrepancies often have nothing to do with you. They demonstrate that her conscious desires and lived behavior aren't synchronized. Freud would have warned you against overvaluing words. He said, "Where it was, there I shall become." This means a person must learn to understand themselves before they can act clearly. Until this process is complete, contradictions emerge, often unconsciously, but very real. A Stoic mindset helps here as well. You don't react to words, you observe patterns. You listen, but you don't believe everything. You test whether her actions align with her statements. When they don't, you recognize it's not your responsibility to correct this, but her responsibility to recognize it. The feminine mind isn't irrational. It's complex, and this complexity often reveals itself through internal contradictions. Those who understand this won't be deceived, but remain alert. This alertness protects you from emotional confusion. One of the most important yet frequently overlooked psychological mechanisms in relationships is projection. Freud defined it as a process where one's own feelings, desires, or fears are transferred onto others without awareness. In emotionally intense relationships, this happens regularly. In women, projection often manifests as accusations. "You're distant. You don't understand me. You just want to control me," even when the man is actually calm, attentive, or even reserved. What happens here isn't conscious manipulation, but unconscious displacement. She senses something within herself that she cannot grasp, so she places it onto you. An example. A woman harbors deep fears of abandonment. Instead of discussing this, she accuses you of pulling away or not being fully present, even though you haven't changed. Her fear becomes the lens through which she sees you. The more intense this fear, the stronger the projection. Or she feels internally unseen, not because you're not seeing her, but because she doesn't truly understand herself. Consequently, she accuses you of lacking depth or not understanding how she feels. What she actually cannot tolerate is her own emotional confusion. Carl Jung went further than Freud. He said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. When she accuses you of things you objectively don't do, this often indicates she doesn't want to look at something within herself or cannot. For you as a man, this becomes dangerous when you take everything personally. You'll justify, explain, defend yourself, and still feel misunderstood. Why? Because the attack wasn't directed at you. You were simply the projection screen for something deeper within her. A Stoic approach offers a crucial advantage here. You learn to distinguish between yourself and her internal state. When you sense her reaction is disproportionate or doesn't match your behavior, step back internally, not from coldness, but from clarity. You don't need to solve what isn't your problem. Projection is a natural but dangerous mechanism. When you recognize it, you protect yourself not only from unnecessary drama, but also preserve your emotional stability. This distinguishes the mature man from the reactive one. Freud was among the first to openly state that female desire isn't weaker, it's simply better hidden. Many women learned early that open sexual desire connects to shame, guilt, or social judgment. The result, they learn to suppress, but longing doesn't disappear. It gets redirected. What cannot be lived becomes controlled. This is why sexual desire in many women doesn't manifest directly, but through indirect routes, through emotional tests, through provocation, through withdrawal, or contradictory behavior. She demands closeness, then pushes you away. She flirts, then ignores you. What appears like games is often expression of internal tension. An example: a woman yearns for passion but simultaneously fears losing control. So she seeks a man who is honorable, but once he shows leadership, she tests his boundaries. Not because she rejects him, but because she wants to see if he can withstand it. Her desire conflicts with her need for security. Freud called this the conflict structure between ID and superego. Animalistic desire meets moral or cultural self-control. In women, this battle often occurs unconsciously. She doesn't know why she's so ambivalent, only that she longs for something while simultaneously holding herself back. For men, this is extremely confusing. You sense she wants closeness, but receive rejection. You see desire in her eyes, but hear coldness in her words. What you're experiencing isn't a game, but an internal split that she doesn't understand herself. If you're emotionally insecure, you'll be drawn into this conflict. Carl Jung would have said that what isn't expressed becomes action. This is exactly what happens here. What she cannot admit, perhaps not even to herself, becomes visible through her behavior. Jealousy, drama, silence. All forms of unconscious communication of suppressed desire. The Stoic approach in this moment: you remain calm, you recognize the tension, but you don't become part of it. You provide leadership without pressuring. You give space without losing yourself. Through this, you create security in which she can show herself if she chooses. Female desire exists. It's simply bound by control, shame, and culture. Those who understand this see through behavior and recognize that what appears rejected is often a suppressed wish. True understanding begins there. Freud was convinced that a woman's relationship with her father profoundly shapes how she later sees men, selects them, and interacts with them. He called this phenomenon, partly ironically, partly seriously, the father complex, a theory that many still find uncomfortable today, precisely because it often proves accurate. A father who was absent, harsh, emotionally cold, or overly critical leaves traces not only on the conscious level, but especially in the unconscious. A woman who from childhood felt she had to fight for love will often be drawn to men where she can repeat exactly this pattern. Distant, hard to grasp, dominant. This doesn't mean she has problems. It simply means her internal attachment pattern was shaped by what was sold to her as love in her early years. If closeness was then tied to performance or submission, she will unconsciously seek exactly this dynamic as an adult. An example: a woman says she wants a loving, patient man, yet once she has him, she feels emotionally empty. She misses the tension, the challenge, the feeling of having to fight for something. She says he's too nice. In reality, he's simply different from the pattern she's accustomed to. Freud saw this as a form of repetition. The psyche attempts to restage unresolved childhood experiences in adult life, hoping to find control or healing this time. But instead of healing, often only frustration emerges, for her and for the man at her side. For you as a man, this means when you notice her relationship with you has more to do with her past than with you yourself. Take distance, not from coldness, but from self-respect. You're not a therapist or a projection screen for an unresolved father conflict. Carl Jung later added that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it remains fate. A woman who isn't aware of her attachment pattern will experience it repeatedly, regardless of which man she's with. This is exactly why it requires men who know themselves well enough not to take this personally. The father complex isn't a myth, but a reality that operates deeper than many are willing to admit. Those who recognize it can avoid being drawn into emotional dynamics that never really had to do with them. One of the most painful contradictions in relationships is this. A woman loves you, but she does things that destroy exactly this love. She withdraws, she doubts, she provokes arguments, or leaves you seemingly without reason. For the man, this feels like betrayal, yet from a psychological perspective, often no malicious intent lies behind it, but rather a deep, unconscious protective reflex. Freud spoke in this context of defense mechanisms. When a person, in this case the woman, experiences too intense closeness or genuine emotional connection, this can trigger old fears. Closeness means vulnerability. Those who learned in the past that closeness hurts don't respond to genuine love with openness, but with flight or destruction. A typical example. Things are going well with you. You give her support, security, respect. But suddenly, she becomes cold. She contacts you less, doubts everything, seeks flaws, not because you've changed, but because she internally hasn't learned to handle stability. For her, the unfamiliar is threatening. Often these reactions stem from childhood or previous relationships. When emotional closeness was there linked to pain or control, the psyche will do everything to avoid exactly that, even if it means destroying something valuable. It's paradoxical. The deeper the feeling, often the greater the fear of it. Carl Jung said the shadow is what we don't want to see, but still belongs to us. When she doesn't know her own wounds, she will punish you for showing them to her. Not because you're wrong, but because you remind her of something she has long suppressed. For you as a man, this is one of the most difficult tests. You see that she feels. You sense that connection exists, yet everything slips away from you. Only one thing helps here: clarity. You cannot save what someone actively destroys, especially not when it comes from an internal conflict she won't acknowledge. The Stoic approach means here that you accept what you cannot change. You don't fight against her fear. You draw your boundary not from pride, but from self-respect. Because true connection needs not only love, it needs maturity. A woman who destroys what she loves isn't evil, but she's also not ready. Those who recognize this can let go without losing themselves. This isn't defeat. This is emotional strength. What you've heard today wasn't an attack on women, but a look behind the conscious facade. Freud spoke things that many prefer to suppress. Not because they're false, but because they're uncomfortable. The feminine psyche isn't weak, it's complex, and exactly that makes it as fascinating as it is dangerous when you don't understand it. For you as a man, understanding isn't an invitation to control, but to clarity. You will recognize that much of what previously confused or hurt you had nothing to do with you, but with internal battles that were never spoken. You will learn to see patterns before you drown in them. A question for you in closing. Which truth from this exploration affected you most, and why? Write it honestly in the comments, and if you sense today that knowledge about female psychology protects you, write the word depth as a sign that you no longer trust blindly, but recognize consciously. Stay alert, stay calm, and remember this. Those who don't idealize the feminine mind but understand it will never again be dependent but sovereign. Therein lies true strength.